A moment of silence for the fallen soldiers and families of victims of wars, both abroad and here at home. Keep it moving, not observing, public servant, out of service, out of order, get in line, don't deserve this, that's absurdist. Best practice is Sunday masses, nightly news feeds the masses, mass extinction on the brink of human evolution, magic, cult like culture, distribution, independent music masses, human trafficking is out of collective consciousness, could raise the bar with our purchase power. Most of cowards disavow me or condemn and call me sour. I can take it, I've been called every name but fake. To my friends, I am that's goodness. To my enemies, I'm strange. To myself, I'm just a nightmare. Sleep is something I can spare. Burn the wicked, both ends work and research because I care. Prayer and meditation are my forms of medication. Super saturated, antibiotic resistant nation. Passive in the face of injustice, watching, waiting. Do I have your attention now? Throw your fear and apprehension now. Why you waiting for the sun to come down? Where you at? You missing everything that life is about. Do I have your attention now? Do I throw your fear and apprehension now? Why you waiting for the sun to come down? You missing everything that life is about. They're not like me, they're God's frightening. They don't like me, they're not right wing. Was the right thing, thunder, lightning, more and bigger. Buy brand new things, I want options, I need choices. Take my freedoms, ignore our voices. Safety's got its price, then I'm ready to pay it. Take me to the heights of the dragon so I can slay him with the lives of our soldiers lost. We'll never know, never cross. Take me to the depths of decay where I can shake it off. The makeup's caked up for the cameras. I can't take it off. I'm 15. I sold my soul, so what's the loss? They're not like me, they're not frightening. They don't like me, they're not right wing. Was the right thing, thunder, lightning, more and bigger. Vibrant new things, we are the greatest. They are all evil, they are the axis. We are the people, they are the other. Created unequal, they need justice. We need democracy, it is their right. So says our plutocracy, and they'll embrace us. Or will erase them off the face of the earth. In this war on terrorism, this war has got to end. Yes. This war has got to end. Yes. This war has got to end. Yes. This war has got to end. Do I have your attention now? Throw your fear and apprehension now. Why you waiting for the sun to come down? Where you at? You missing everything that life is about. Do I have your attention now? Do I throw your fear and apprehension now? Why you waiting for the sun to come down? You missing everything that life is about. A moment of silence for the fallen soldiers and families of victims of wars, both abroad and here at home.
Thank you, Maya, for sharing your art with us. I think it's so important. Thank you for everyone who's in the room with us today. We have a great conversation lined up. I'm excited for what we're going to talk about today. My name is Natasha. I'm an Air Force veteran, retired after 20 years in 2016. I'm back home here in my native city on the south side of Chicago. And, really what radicalized me was seeing the connection between militarism and what is happening in my community. And so I'm a veteran for peace because I believe that is the right way forward. And then when we can defund the Pentagon and fund the people's needs, that we'll all have just a better life overall, right? Particularly amid COVID-19. The reason why we started this live, this webinar, was after the unfortunate murder of George Floyd. And we saw the National Guard and military be deployed to our cities and neighborhoods across the map. And so we wanted to stand in this gap and say, stand down. And so a part of this, political education and learning and discussions that we have is around a myriad of topics and how they impact where we are in this space. And so I'm really excited for our guest that's going to be on today. But the way we do this is we start out with current events just to kind of fill the space for a moment and get warmed up. Miles and Mike, would you want to do like an introduction? And then when you do your introduction, I would love to hear y'all talk a little bit about this topic that y'all have been on for like the past weeks, just chopping it up and going back and forth, is around current events or the current public firings of the Secretary of Defense via tweet and the Director of Homeland Security. Really puts into perspective that this might not just be about not conceding, that this is a slippery slope into what we've seen perhaps from our military and global experience. So, yeah, enlighten us.
Well, okay. My name is Miles Megasyfe. Mental energies gather and circulate in positive harmony. And I was in Cuba for a year. I was in Okinawa for a year with the U.S. Marine Corps. And neither of those places has a puppet government, which I believe is what Trump is trying to do. But I did get to see the influences of, the influence of America, of Americana, of American capitalism and American bases in those places. And I know Trump, his moves, we've normalized policy over Twitter now. So him firing people or making statements that then get talked about on the news has become normal. He does things on Twitter that become normal parts of public policy, which is crazy. And then firing these certain people at this time, knowing that he's lying constantly about the election, getting called out for it on Twitter, and his base is riled up in his defense and proud to be violent. And there were acts of violence in DC this weekend. For me, it rings of he's trying to get a coup. He's trying to have a successful coup, taking out key people at certain times and acting like that's not his ultimate goal. Which I believe it is. He's scared to leave office. I'd love to hear Mike. I know Mike has some jewels for it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think you're right. Hello, everyone. Glad to be here. My name's Mike. I was in the Navy. I'm a member of Veteran for Peace. I occupied both Iraq and Afghanistan, sins for which I can never truly atone, but I attempt to by participating in venues like this and through personal actions in my own neighborhoods and community. But so as far as Trump goes and this right-wing coup that he's attempting to establish, I got to be honest, like I'm so jaded. I often find myself really distanced from what's happening in the mainstream media. And I purposefully try to eliminate it because my brain just can't take my emotional status can just barely, hanging on by fingernails with all this. But essentially, I kind of defer to my understanding of historical materialism and analysis of past fascist regimes that have come and go. I think that what's happening with Trump is, yes, he is attempting a coup. He is eliminating anyone that in any way sort of contradicts his project. I think that there's a very real chance that he's facing criminal charges when he leaves office. And so for those reasons, he's doing everything he can to prop up and to build a community that will protect him. He's giving positions to anybody that like swears fealty to the God King that he is. And but that being said, in the VFP Facebook page, I noticed, in other anti-war military pages and conversations that, if the media suggests that perhaps they put a woman in charge of the Secretary of Defense or a person of color in charge as the Secretary of Defense, that would be some measure of progress. But I flat out deny that. Our goal is not to have a woman committing war crimes across the world, or we don't need more war criminals, people of color. What we need is to fundamentally abolish the military-industrial complex, and to end it. So I'm not too excited, about any of that. It's just kind of a logical conclusion to a fascist project that America is, unfortunately, at the end of the day. So that's all my thoughts. I really went off. We have a big show today. We've got a great guest here. We've been talking for about 12 minutes now, and I think that's a good introduction to the show. We should probably go ahead and start talking about Dissenters and our great guest this week, Alex Ding. So go ahead, Natasha.
Oh, no. I was just gonna say, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. You're never just off the track, Mike. Like, I think, it's good that we have this 360 view of things, and it kind of makes being on this team dynamic, because we have different on-ramps and vantage points. But yeah, I just, I'm really excited about this conversation, because as we've talked about, the things since we started this, live, is really around how do we make ourselves smarter? What sort of political and public education really that we need to like move and organize in our spaces, cities, and towns. And one of the things that we've talked about as Veterans for Peace is really how can we be of service to our communities and start to, fall in line and support the local grassroots like movement and work that's happening specifically around just BIPOC organizations and how they're, organizing themselves. And so here in Chicago, where we have, just a myriad of youth-led actions and movements and righteous uprising that has happened in the last, 8-9 months, but years before that, but specifically now that, amid COVID, I think we're paying more attention, specifically after George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, and all of the names and hashtags that we've had to, just respond to. So here in Chicago, I think that, our speaker that's joining us today and giving us the time is really a partner that we've had with Chicago Veterans for Peace. We had a Dr. King or MLK event just before COVID lockdown, where they came and joined us and spoke with us. So familiar with their work. And then I saw some, organizing that they've been doing over the last few months that caught my eye. So I'm really excited to have Alex Ding with Dissenters on to like take up space, tell us about your work, your story, and the on-ramps to this. And let's get into some conversation after that.
Can y'all hear me? Yeah, thank you so much, Natasha, for that introduction. And I'm just so, geeked to be here with y'all. I really admire and respect the work that Veterans for Peace does. And it's just clear to me that even from this space, and the commitment that y'all have to political education and organizing is really deep. And so, just really grateful to be here with y'all. But as Natasha mentioned, my name is Alex Ding, and I am one of the organizing co-directors of Dissenters. We are a new youth movement organizing against war and militarism. And our vision is really broad. It's to build a new generation of young people to reclaim resources from the war industry and to reinvest in life-giving services to repair relationships with the earth and with people around the world. So I can share a little bit more about me and how I got into this work, and then dive more into kind of Dissenters and the things that we've been doing on the ground to really respond to, as Natasha mentioned, these righteous uprisings in Chicago, which is where I'm based, but also across the country and across the world. So a bit about me. I'm 25 years old. I've spent about 6 years now organizing communities across several different movement ecosystems. My family originally, they immigrated from China My parents were active during the student protests in Tiananmen Square, and that was a part of their kind of impetus, the kind of repression that the students faced to immigrate and to leave the country. And so I grew up and I was born in Minneapolis and grew up in between Minneapolis and Hong Kong and then Indiana, where I actually went to a military high school. So it was a brief moment when I thought I might join the military, but I quickly realized like that was not for me. It was not what I wanted to be doing. But yeah, a lot of my kind of like my road to being politicized is really through student organizing. So I was a student organizer working on a number of different projects in Chicago, where I was a college student around prisons and policing. And so as a student, I helped launch and lead a campaign at the University of Chicago called Care Not Cops. And that was a campaign in response to one of our comrades was a Black disabled student who was shot by the university campus police force while experiencing a mental health crisis. And so we launched this campaign in response to that, really an abolitionist campaign to defund and disarm the University of Chicago Police, which is one of the largest private police forces in the country. And we're seeing kind of work pop off across the country right now, too, around getting cops off campuses, cops out of schools, high schools, public schools, private schools of all kinds. And yeah, I think some bit more about my background, too. I was kind of a member of a couple of national collectives working to build student power, one called Student Action around free college for all, and another called the National Prison Divestment Campaign. So again, kind of pushing universities and holding them accountable for their role in war and militarism, divesting from prisons, and a lot of the work with Dissenters too is targeting universities for their role in kind of investments in weapons contracts. And so yeah, I think a lot of my work is really, I come to this work, I think, with a kind of deep commitment to prison and police abolition. That's kind of the space where I was politicized in Chicago. There were so many kind of really formative and really righteous kind of struggles around and ongoing struggles around police and prison abolition. And yeah, I think the last thing I'll say, I guess, about myself is that I'm also really feel very deeply committed to in lineage of kind of immigrant rights and AAPI organizing, queer and trans AAPI organizing here in Chicago, and like young people doing that work too. And so seeing directly to the ways that, war and militarism have, displaced folks and continue to kind of haunt communities and bring violence into our homes. And yeah, kind of bringing all of those experiences with me into this work now. And also I would just say like a deep like belief and faith in young people, particularly young people of color, who have been directly impacted by war and militarism, and our ability to organize, to build the world we need, to topple, the U.S. empire. Those are all of the things that ground me and inspire me every day. But yeah, that's just a little bit about me, and I can share a little bit more about Dissenters as well. Our website, if folks, I don't know if Natasha, you want to drop that, but our website is wearedissenters.org. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're about to be on TikTok too. So we're trying to be everywhere and just share kind of our vision and organizing with folks. But we're a relatively new organization. We launched in January of 2020. This year was our kind of kickoff inaugural training, brought together outstanding student organizers from 25 campuses from every region of the country. And we trained them up in kind of direct action, strategy, messaging, campaign skills. And so, I think as y'all probably have experienced as well in your organizing with Veterans for Peace, we had to kind of really step back and, because of the pandemic shutdowns, reassess a lot of our work. But in that kind of, since the pandemic shutdown has happened, our members have continued to kind of organize rapid response actions. We put out a call around ending COVID sanctions in Iran, organizing mutual aid support networks to support fellow students who have been impacted by the pandemic and the shutdowns. Like Natasha mentioned too, trying to kind of really respond, do some rapid response and mobilization around some of, what some are calling the largest uprising in U.S. history, to demand, divestment from violent white supremacist institutions and reinvestment into resources that our communities need. And so a lot of that, a lot of that for us has been kind of, acknowledging that our communities are facing some of the biggest political challenges in modern history. Our communities are under attack, facing militarized repression, escalating in the streets. A lot of these compounding crises of, racism, climate change, capitalism. I like the way that, Mike, you just laid out all of that, all of those crises, right? And so we're really trying to respond in this moment by kind of calling for, really energized, radical, visionary organizing from people that have been facing the brunt of political repression. I can share a little bit more about some of the trainings and some of the kind of political interventions we've been trying to work on, but really trying to connect militarism in our neighborhoods, policing, prisons, and, the military industrial complex as two sides of the same coin, trying to build out, both, the kind of local organizing, but also the kind of internationalist frame around how do we actually be in solidarity with our kind of comrades across the globe. And so, just working on kind of building that ecosystem, building kind of the power of young people, and prioritizing youth leadership at every opportunity we can, as well as kind of nourishing a culture of gratitude, of creativity, of joy in our movement spaces. But I'll pause there and I know that was a lot. And see if y'all have any questions or comments or anything.
Thank you so much for that, Alex. That was fantastic. You guys are doing a lot of good work there. I'm interested in a little bit of the background, because I went to a public school in Ohio, and we had recruiters, but this whole idea of like military high schools blows my mind. This is something that I honestly I was unaware of this. I was wondering if you could give us a little bit of history and background on these military high schools in Chicago. Apparently there's several of them.
Yeah, and I didn't go to a military high school in Chicago, so I don't know as much about them, to be honest with you. But I do know that there are, and I think they're building a new one as well, to my understanding. I know that they're, kind of, one of the projects that I was like, can point y'all to, and this is kind of a crew that we're connected to, but this crew out of the P.O. Box Collective is working on kind of mapping out militarism in Chicago, and like those military schools are definitely a big part of it. But also, right, like recruiters that just come through to high schools all across the city, and particularly, recruiting in West and South Side neighborhoods, Black and Brown neighborhoods, where they know folks are, essentially like looking for ways to pay for college, because, student debt is no joke. I think, to the fact that Boeing is headquartered here in Chicago as well. I mean, there's militarism seeped into all of these institutions, from arts and culture to our public schools to, literally everywhere we look, police as well, and so I think, I don't know. I wish I could speak a little bit more to the Chicago-based kind of military school space, but for me, it was the military school I went to was it was a boarding school in Indiana, and a lot of and specifically a lot of folks who were interested in kind of being a part of, like, it's a big funnel for like Air Force academies, like West Point, some of these like military academies, like a lot of folks. I think we were like the #1 feeder into those kind of schools, the naval academies. So it's a different space, I would say, than the Chicago high school kind of military high school space.
You, Alex, you came of age in war. Like you're 25. You've been like your whole school experience almost. The U.S. has been in war, right? Like. Can you remember it? You don't probably remember a time that we weren't actively in a war. Okay. So then do you come to this work from your history? Your family history is incredible. So do you come to this work as a combination of like following in the footsteps of your family, or just seeing what the injustice you've seen here in this country, like growing up? Like,
yeah, definitely. I really appreciate that question. I think in many ways, like, anti-militarism has become this kind of political kind of framework for me that, like, I think, is able to kind of contain all of the multitudes of a lot of these kind of different experiences. And what I mean by that is I think that there's a lot of ways that, the kind of prison abolitionist work and the kind of local organizing. It's very specific to, kind of Chicago around police and prison abolition. And then being able to kind of like think through some of these other sets of experiences I've had that have to do with, kind of diaspora, war, repression, militarism, and like I mentioned, I think of myself in community with a lot of other kind of like AAPI folks, who have been kind of displaced, who are refugees. A lot of my comrades and friends, and so I think like a lot of the way that anti-militarism I think is a useful kind of like organizing framework is, I think that it's able to bring together a lot of these like intersections of different kinds of work. And so I don't know, I see myself as like really kind of in and being able to merge those things, and why this feels like such important high stakes work for me, is because I think these things are the same. Like I think that they're all interlocked as well in the way that we need to be organizing, against policing and prisons, and naming, imperialism, naming war, naming militarism as things that have affected a lot of us. And so, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
It's really good. It's interesting. It's so then you I'm sure you get othered all the time. You've probably been told, have you been told go back to your country or something, even though you're American? Have you been like, I'm sure people have told you that.
Yeah, definitely.
So then do you find like your community, and I'm kind of like leading you, but are these communities that are probably these are good communities for us to like, for movement building, kind of like, untapped resources, perhaps, right? Thank you for being here today. I'm loving this. I want more questions for you. I want to see where Natasha goes and Mike go, but I definitely got a couple more for you.
Yeah, definitely. If I could just speak to that really quickly. I think that that's a really important point that you made around specifically the way that, I think folks are, this kind of reactionary right wing kind of narrative. And I think this is something we see across time and space and history of like divide and conquer, right? But in reality, I think a lot of what's true is that like we need to be in solidarity with our with people's movements, with people's struggles, and our enemies are not, and I'm speaking from the position of like, kind of, Americans and like leftists in America. Our enemies are not, like working class folks in, wherever, that are kind of like, and some, white ring folks are painting as kind of like scapegoats around deindustrialization. Like our enemies are war elites. Our enemies are folks like, Northrop Grumman, like Boeing, like these folks that are profiting off of the destruction of our planet and our communities. And so I think and that's, a lot of what we're trying to do is really kind of building, infrastructure and ways for us to be in solidarity internationally with people's struggles across the world, and breaking down the kind of, lies that we're fed from war elites and war profiteers about who the enemy is. And I think we see this a lot too in the way that it plays out in kind of like the way that, Black and brown and Muslim and Arab communities are targeted both here for, like recruitment into like, the military industrial complex, but then also those are the same kind of like narratives and mythologies that are used to, paint, folks as terrorists, as, the folks to justify endless war. And so we're like breaking down like the idea that, there's this like us and them, but in reality, like the them is like war elites. Like those are our enemies. Our enemies are like U.S. empire. So yeah, that's just what that made me think of.
Yeah, I'd like to take a moment to boost what you're saying. As a person who occupied Iraq and Afghanistan, we went there. I knew nothing about those people. I didn't know anything about the people that actually lived in Iraq or Afghanistan right up until up until years later, really, after like really starting to think about it and analyze it and start to understand what was going on, what I did there, who those people were. I was told, we were just told such ridiculous things right up. The army the military just gave us such bad information purposefully. So yeah, the people's struggle is the one. Internationalist people's struggle is the one to the correct banner to fly. So I totally feel that. But specifically speaking about Chicago and Dissenters.org, I'd like to know. I was just in Chicago last week, actually, and I love it. And man, it would be so cool to relocate to Chicago because it seems like there's a lot of action going on there. There's a lot of good organizing. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about, so we have all these international problems, these things that seem so weighty and just, we can't overcome them. Like, so how do we actually go out and start to make change or start to pull people into the movement, like what you guys are doing with Dissenters?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And to be honest with you, that's one that I, sit and think with a lot and, come back to, of this, like, how do we make change? What is my theory of change? And always kind of, experimenting and struggling and thinking through a lot of different things. And so I don't know if I have an answer, to be honest. But I can speak to a little bit about kind of the vision of Dissenters and the way that we've mapped out our role, right? And that's just important for me to name, I guess, in the sense that I think we want to be clear that we're working in a movement ecosystem, like, in solidarity and alongside a bunch of other amazing organizations, including, Veterans for Peace. And so we're just holding down a slice of that. And I think a part of it is kind of like building these like strong coalitions. And our slice, right, is like specifically we want to be building, a massive youth movement. We want to win a generation of young people so that, it's like not cool to be not anti-imperialist, not anti-militarist. And so, holding down that 18 to 35 young people, particularly young people of color directly impacted by militarism. But we want to be, mobilizing thousands. And so I think a lot of that for us looks like creating kind of strategy that can escalate our plan to win so that over time, we're really a base building organization. We believe that that's really like what our vision to achieve, the kind of sweeping potential legislation. Let's say if we're trying to defund the Pentagon, however, in 25 years, how do we get there, right? I think for us, a lot of that is building our base, right? Building, thousands, we're absorbing thousands of people. But also I think a lot of that in this moment right now looks like kind of being able to really create containers for people to develop as leaders. And through containers, by containers, I really mean like strategic campaigns that are using direct action, that are using absorption, that are using, creative kind of social media, to on local campuses. So like starting from the local campuses where students feel like they have a stake in those communities and those fights, and holding, their institutions locally accountable for their kind of role in militarism. Because like we mentioned before, militarism is everywhere. It's steeped into all institutions. And so that's where we really start kind of strategic campaigns that feel urgent, that feel like responsive to our political moment. And I can speak more about those kind of campaigns and what those have looked like. But then kind of building towards building off-campus political power. So what does it look like to kind of, absorb then just young people more generally into regional work, into city-based work, into national work as well. And then finally kind of being able to build to a point, and, all this time we're continuing to absorb people, continuing to bring people into our movement in these different containers, and then being able to kind of like, really flex our political power, right? And so we want to stigmatize war, and we want to force our institutions to follow. And so our institutions, our elected officials, we want it to be, we want to have built such a big base and alongside in this movement ecosystem with folks that, politicians look stupid for, taking money from weapons contractors, right? Unlike the moment we're in now, where Biden's, cabinet, I think it's 1/3 of all of Biden's cabinet right now, and senior advisors are folks who are taking money from the weapons industry, right? So we want to be to a place where that's like, I would never do that, because we've stigmatized war so much. And stigmatize militarism so much that our institutions have no choice but to kind of respond to the demands of our movement. So that's kind of a little bit about our theory of change and our kind of, strategy for how our plan to win. But it's definitely something that I think a lot about. I'm still trying to figure out a little bit.
I'm with you on that, Alex. I'm trying to figure that out as well. I make music that is no militarism, no misogyny, no materialism. And it's movement music, and I always find myself feeling great about my music. I feel really passionate. I love my music. Other people love my music. People who hear it love it. It's kind of like these peace movements. It's like people who hear about it, people who know us love it. They love the movement, and then spreading the message. So I think a big part of spreading the message comes into your campaign choice, right? You talked about strategic planning. So you're clearly like TikTok. You're going to be using all forms of media, multimedia, right? Like Veterans for Peace UK, they made these dolls, these GI Joe like figures that were really like just sad, horrible, beautiful examples of the horror of war. Like a gory body hanging off of a gurney with a child holding on to it. And this is like the scene that the kid buys rather than the shiny army truck. You buy the medic van with blood dripping out the back. So are you going to be doing things like this in your are you going to share your campaign? How far along are you? Or could you do you have any little tidbits that you could talk about, or methods that you're going to be using to get at people's hearts?
Definitely. Yeah. I definitely want to answer that, but I want to give Natasha a chance to, and maybe if you want to, ask a question too, and I can kind of weave and see what pieces of it, both those questions I can respond to. But thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just over here like, yes, Alex, like, yes, that is literally what we have been talking about, not just here on the show, excuse me, not just here on the show, but, we have been meeting Veterans for Peace members, and our ally groups have really been meeting in this moment because we know recruiters have found a way to virtually recruit young people, right? Excuse me. And so some of the things that you were talking about, is like such like this is the moment to stand in the gap. And so to see that we've been thinking or just not really knowing, right? Like how how we can support one another in our work and just move it forward. So it was just really good to hear you just lay things out, because I think for the benefit of our members, this is good for us to also see that there's a conversation already happening. So I'm thinking about your events that you all have had over the last few months. Specifically, I'm curious, I heard you talking about the organizing that you all have been doing across the map, not just here in Chicago. Can you share a little bit about what those spaces have looked like? And again, what we're trying to get from this is how we, Veterans for Peace, and our, veteran allies, our viewership, can support the work that you all are doing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely want to drop some links too in terms of some of the social media things, which I in our newsletter, which is definitely the best way to kind of stay up to date with our work. But yeah, just to Miles, to address your question really quickly too, I think that definitely I love even some of those ideas you just threw out. I was writing them down, oh, that's it. We should do some of that. But I think that cultural work and cultural organizing is such a big piece of this, because I think a lot of what we're trying to do is we're trying to win a narrative, right? We're win a narrative that I think right now, it's true that the U.S. military is one of the most, favorable and respected institutions. When you poll Americans, people support the military by to a wide, overwhelming margin, right? And so a part of what we see as what we're doing is we're organizing folks, we're organizing campaigns, we're doing, all of these things, but we're also trying to kind of really shift the narrative. And I think a lot of that is being able to do the kind of art making and cultural organizing that some of those ideas that you mentioned. And I think you know, especially because we're kind of holding down, you know, the piece around organizing young folks. Like we know too that that's how young folks, you know, where do we find young folks? Like young folks are on the internet, they're, you know, on Twitter, they're on TikTok, and I think, you know, being able to kind of reach young folks through music and art and through, you know, new media, through kind of like creative. You know, creative like video making, viral kind of like moments of direct action. Like that's where we want to be meeting folks, because that's where we know young folks are at. And that's also how we know that, you know, that's also how we kind of like begin to kind of shift to some of this narrative about reimagining, well, what does safety look like? You know, it doesn't look like endless wars, right? It looks like XYZ. And so, yeah, just definitely want to uplift that art making and culture, and kind of shifting the narrative is a huge part of how we see what we're doing. And then, yeah, to your question too about some of the work, Natasha, that we've been able to kind of do. I think a lot of it, you know, so I can just give some examples, but in Chicago, I think one of the exciting things that we were able to do, and this is like prior, so I actually came onto Dissenters like 2 months ago. And so a lot of this work, I was a part of that, but I wasn't in my current role. But this, we were able to kind of partner with like local organizing in Chicago. So some of the kind of defund Chicago police work, the campaign in Chicago, as well as kind of the Black Abolitionist Network that was kind of holding down some of the mass mobilization after, in the wake of the shooting of George Floyd. So we partnered with them to do some training. You know, we want to be able to absorb folks, give them skills. And so we did a series of direct action trainings. And I think the one that, you know, was really exciting to see was also kind of, it was a virtual training. I think we were able to, you know, along with this collective, train like 600 folks, and just some like direct action skills, like what is the theory of direct action? How do we like get more folks in the streets, like being able and willing and ready and excited about taking direct action in a way that feels safe, but also disruptive, and applying pressure to, you know, our targets, to defund police, defund war. And so that's like, I think, a core piece of what we see our work doing is, we just wrapped up a virtual training. We trained about like 45 folks, students. This was like last month, from across the country. It was a 4-day virtual training, really in-depth training, through all of the kind of like we touched on direct action. We touched on kind of storytelling strategies, narrative strategies. We touched on how do we build kind of abolitionist, anti-militarist campaigns. But yeah, I think training is kind of really a key piece for us. Like, how can we give young people the tools and the kind of political education, like y'all are kind of doing with this call, to take action and to be empowered to take action. So that was really exciting, that we just wrapped up. And then, yeah, I think, you know, being able to support kind of on-campus student organizing. So some examples, like I know, like, we had our, you know, Stanford chapter at Dissenters. They did a really dope kind of banner drop and action to really protest like Condoleezza Rice, who was like war criminal, definitely, and pointed to, I think they're like international relations school. And so they were able to, yeah, just kind of like organize some folks on campus to say that, you know, why are we having war criminals appointed to these like positions in our universities, like, and really raising awareness and trying to kind of like get that message out there. That's an example. And then, yeah, I think a lot of like recently too, with some of the organizing happening at like Northwestern University around, yeah, they've been in like, I think now 45 days of continuous, you know, direct action against their university to abolish and defund their campus police force. But we partnered with them in that campaign to be able to have a conversation around militarism within both that kind of campus campaign, and also kind of tying military, like what is militarism as a framework? How is kind of campus policing in its very local sense tied to global policing and kind of the military industrial complex? So that's just like a couple of examples of some of the work that we do. But yeah, I think a lot of it is right now just kind of grow and trying to be able to continue to energize and politicize and bring more and more folks into our movement space.
Thank you so much for that. Like, it's really like important for us to hear that. I know that you have another event. So thank you so much for spending the time that you have. If you have one more like moment to just answer a quick question that I just saw here in the chat, does Dissenters have a group in Hampton Roads area that you know of?
I'm not sure where Hampton Roads is. I'm sorry about that. But what I can do is I'm going to drop, or I don't know the best way to do this, but I can send my email as well as kind of our Instagram and Twitter and, website stuff. And I can follow up with whoever asked that question. But yeah, I would love to, if for anyone else who wants to get connected to our work and, follow us and learn what we do on Instagram. I think most of our pages were just We Are Dissenters. So that's on Twitter, on Instagram. And then my email, if folks want to be able to connect with me to ask me questions directly, I'm Alex, ALEX, at wearedissenters.org.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. This has been great. Thank you for the work that you are doing. It feels really good to rep Chicago in this way, because there's so many narratives about our city and what's not happening here. So you just really blew that out. That was a home run. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, and thank y'all for the work you do. Like, the political education is so important. And so, yeah, I feel like I have mad respect for y'all for just being able to do what you do. And thank you so much for having me on this space tonight.
Thanks for being here. It was wonderful to have you as a guest. Hopefully
Definitely.
We can talk to you again soon.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Cool.
That was great.
Boom. Boom goes the dynamite.
Yeah. Shouts to Natasha for bringing on her fellow city.
You know what I'm saying?
I'm rad. You know what I'm saying? Change.
Yeah.
Chicago's rad, man. I'm jelly.
No, you've been saying that, Mike, that you might be changing your zip code to the 606. Okay.
It's aspirational.
Okay. But
We'll
yeah,
see.
I think, we had planned on listening or hearing from some young people who are at the high school level. Apologize, I have an eyelash or something, but but they had a prior engage or a conflict and couldn't join us. But I'm hoping that we can bring more youth voices on like this in the future, not just in Chicago, but maybe have a conversation of young people from around across the map. So if anyone has recommendations, if you know a youth group that's doing great work in your community, link them to us. Our email is standdown@veteransforpeace.org. We're responsive. We'll get back with you in a day or two. And we'd love to host like a youth table around demilitarization of schools, particularly, young folks not enlisting in this moment. And if they do decide to do that, to be able to be, sharp with the questions that they would need in those recruiting spaces. So thank you. I'm glad. This was a great show.
Wonderful. I'll put that call out internationally too. I know we want to have our folks on from Okinawa. I'm sure we'd like to have some folks on from Hawaii, from Korea, and all over the Pacific, all over Europe, all over Africa. Anybody who's willing to, who's interested in coming and sharing their stories of righteous rebellion, uprising, as Natasha says, righteous uprising against these imperial powers. You have a home here. We'll give you space. As long as it's righteous, it's got to be righteous. All right, no unrighteous rebellions.
I see an interesting question in the comments that I think I'd like to attempt to answer here. It's
Cool.
a pretty big question.
We get some questions, y'all.
Yeah, it says, hello, how does the panel assess the effort worldwide to end impunity for war criminals, absent which guarantees the continuance of criminal wars of aggression? Thanks. So this is a big question. I think part of being an anti-imperialist and I think the goal, like for me, for the anti-war veteran community, is to try and do political education on the importance of anti-imperialism and not just the idea of being anti-war. And I think part of that is understanding that there are just wars and unjust wars. We lost Natasha. That's unfortunate, but I'm sure she'll be back.
She'll be back. She has her eyes messing with her.
Oh, okay. All right. So the idea is understanding the difference between just and unjust wars, and the American.
Not only it's I mean, if you're not even getting to it, if you're not going to worry about assessing it, we're going to just move past that. Talk about just and unjust. Are you talking about this question?
Yeah, this is my attempt at assessing the idea of like actually prosecuting war criminals. So as long as America becomes as long as America,
it's not asking us about prosecution. How does the panel, us, assess the effort worldwide, like I think peace movement, to end impunity for war criminals? To end impunity for war criminals, absent which guarantees the continuance of criminal wars of aggression.
Yeah,
I'm not quite sure what the.
Yeah, it's worded a little strange, but I mean, I'm interpreting it the best I can.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, absolutely, we have to end impunity for war criminals. And the way to do that is to begin to understand that there's just and unjust war. And the war that America wages in the world is unjust. It's an imperialist project meant to, control the world essentially through economic coercion, through violence, through the military industrial complex, and here at home through the police industrial complex and the prison industrial complex. And so part of our just war is to be prison abolitionists, end the prison industrial complex and turn the prisons into schools of revolution and thought, to challenge the police, to defund police departments, and eventually, hopefully one day, of course, progressive people with of right mind and right direction, the correct understanding of reality will win, of course, because fascism is a self-defeating project.
And because the universe is a love-moving machine, it doesn't move towards chaos and hate. That's
we exist, so there's something to that. Humanity exists and love exists, so it must be meant to be, and we have to commit ourselves to that and continue that project of love and international acceptance and the end of war. It must end.
Hey y'all, that was a really good. I think you did excellent there. I'm gonna assess you right now, Mike, and say you did wonderful. Now I think we have a thing here. We have a lot of questions right now. And there's no way we can answer them in 7 minutes. But I think we should have a show where we answer our guests' questions. I think that's overdue. Number one, like I try to these are really like some of these questions that are coming up right now. This was a really interesting topic for the folks who are on, because these are questions that not just statements about the system, right?
Yeah. Let's take one or two. I think we've got 7 minutes. Let's at least hit two of them while we have folks' attention.
Go for it, Natasha.
I'm curious. Miles called it out. Which one do you?
I like this one. I saw this one stood out to me.
Okay, great. I'll start off here in Chicago. Currently this week, our mayor and the council, city council is having a debate around the city budget. Quite honestly, the mayor's office put out a survey about a month or so ago, and overwhelmingly, the city of Chicago, surveyed that they want to see funding of all of the social services that we do not have and need in this moment. At this time, there's a 7 to 8 day wait to be tested for COVID here in the city of Chicago. And if you've been paying attention to this subject nationally and on mainstream media, if you watch it, quite honestly, we're in a tough spot, right? Our hospitals are at capacity. And so we have a mayor who, despite her own survey and the responses that was received, wants to overwhelmingly fund the Chicago Police Department to the tune of around 45% of the city's budget. And what we know is that the police don't keep us safe here. If you know the history of the Chicago Police Department, they're also under a federal consent decree to which they are not following like the mandates and deadlines, that they have constitutionally broken the trust of the people here in Chicago. And so how do you put pressure is like what I've seen the young people doing, like Alex and this and just the work and the coalition of young people that, that like some, keep the city focused on the target is by listening to them, supporting them. If you're not going to go out in the streets and go and protest them, that they occupy the mayor's block quite often. If you're not that type of person, go and drop off some pieces and some waters and keep it moving. Donate to their organizations, because again, we all have a role to play in this work. I think, so no matter what layer in terms of pressure that you can support, I think this is the moment when we should, all be doing that. So, and not just here in Chicago, but when we, as we engage in like the federal level of what's going on, I think, there's a lot of mixed views in terms of like how veterans, should participate. As veterans, we should support grassroots work. We should use our global experience and voice because it matters in certain spaces, and we can really be great allies. So plug in however you can, Mike, and let's do the work.
Yeah, absolutely. I unite with everything you said there. And just to boost that message, as veterans, perhaps maybe we even have a greater responsibility to pay our debt to society for participating in the institutions that we did and the actions that we committed. So absolutely. Yeah, I mean, as far as COVID goes, our country is handling COVID worse than every other country on the face of the planet, bar none.
By far.
By far.
Far and away. We are number one in being the worst at a health pandemic.
Yeah, the borders are closed overseas for a reason. People aren't letting Americans in because we're completely, our government, our leaders are completely pig-headed. Even suggesting, in Cincinnati, even like liberal city council members and the mayor and stuff, for them to even suggest that there's going to be another lockdown, people are losing their minds across the board, no matter what your political spectrum is, because we know that there's no one coming to help us. If they shut the economy down again, there's not going to be a monthly bailout. There's nothing for small businesses, for restaurants, for the service industry, for Uber and Lyft and all these like day gig jobs, which have become the majority of the population. The industrial working class has been eliminated in the United States, and the vast majority of people are in service sector jobs. And nobody's coming to help us. So it makes sense that people would be outraged that the local city would be talking about a shutdown, because people are going to literally starve to death. They're going to be thrown out of their homes, and we're facing a housing crisis to which America is completely unprepared for and totally unprecedented in American history. So it's
larger
all bad.
By far larger than the Great Depression. If the rooster wants to come home, if the crows want to come home and roost, if they want to come home right now, there's a lot to feast on. You know what I'm saying? Like the American carcass is spread wide open. It's like it's ready for the taking. We are holding on barely. I'm gonna put this up here because I'm gonna talk about it right now. KJ, I agree we need to have peace, but I don't agree with demilitarization. We need to have the biggest, baddest military so that other countries don't fuck with us, and for defense. Now, this is I think, a common argument from people that our military, we have this country, you have the right to talk, you have the right to say what you say because of our military. You have you have freedom of speech, and you need to respect the military because of it, and it's what gives you the right. It's not why we have freedom of speech. The military is not why we have freedom of speech. We have freedom of speech because people have fought for it continuously in the face of people trying to take it away generation after generation. So the idea that peace is obtained through violence or through military force is also not true to life, because look at the evidence around us. We have the biggest, baddest military in the world, and we're currently in at least 7 conflicts, 7 named conflicts around the world. And we impose sanctions on people imposed by that military might that leaves some countries the absolute poorest, like the absolute poorest in the world, and can't rebuild in the face of clear injustice, like Palestine and Israel. I will use that example of Gaza, the Gaza Strip being like the largest outdoor prison in the world. And then I also want to say, like, we as military men or as private citizens, veterans, or whatever, don't necessarily have a requirement to speak out, because we all come to this from different perspectives. But when you get the urge, when you get the calling to speak out, then you got to go do it, because that's how we manifest our world, right? Through the things that we vision, through the things that we imagine, and then speaking them to life, it will make them true. I loved Alex on the show. Natasha, you did big with that. The language that they used was just incredible. And like you can tell that there's constant meditation and rumination on, the things to say, and how to say, and the people to work with, and the way that they all work together. That was marvelous.
Yeah, sure.
Powerful.
That's what I learned from them. Like I've always, paid attention. We've had young people speaking and taking the mic at our Chicago VFP events for the last couple years now, because the young people are sharp. Yeah. They understand the world. And like the question you posed to Alex is, she's never not known war. And so, let's be clear, this is the moment where we can have some real intergenerational movement happening and rowing in the same direction. And I feel like, we should not miss this opportunity. So again, wherever you are in the nation, find those groups that are doing the work. Be creative on social media if you're not sure where they are, to seek them out. When I was stationed in Pensacola, sometimes I would have to go to Tallahassee to go to an event, which was over 2 hours. So again, you just want to be creative and think about, really standing in the gap wherever that is. Most everything right now is virtual, so you can participate in a myriad of ways. And I just want to say to the point really quick about the statement that KJ had. I usually sometimes ask people that post and say things like that, like, have you worn those boots? And if you have you deployed or had combat experience? And oftentimes when the answer is no, I'm pushing in, let's talk about this thing then. Let me share with you what combat stress has done to me as a Black woman in America, processing what I participating in, and then seeing, the militarization of the police department that has its foot on our collective necks in the city of Chicago. So I see no room between the combat in deployments and what I see happening here in the cities. And so I ask people to connect that. And when you know that the militarization of police departments is a drag on, or takes away from city resources, right? You have to start asking yourself these questions. So I really want to start asking KJ, like, what informs you of believing that we have to have the most badass military? Look at the military budget. Trillions of dollars have not made us any more safe than we were before Iraq war. We have to be clear about that. And so let's be more mindful about reading outside of what we already know. Spaces like this is why we created this. I'm excited for KJ's comment, because that's really where we want to just keep focus. Is, where can we bring people in and really open up our chest to have a conversation, to know that that's someone that might not have the same knowledge that we do.
Let's open up our chest. Our heart chakra, our heart is in our chest, the biggest chakra in our body. We do back bends. We open it up. We literally expand love into the world. Yo, Hollywood shows us that our military are heroes.
Man.
There are very few Hollywood movies, very few made for TV movies or video games that show us that the military and the police are not heroes. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how I grew up. And I know that's a whole nother conversation. I think it's a valid one. I think we should have it. And I definitely want to honor our guests, and you see there's a response to it. People do want that, so we should schedule a show very soon where we just answer questions. I think that would be cool, and we have like a talk back, and it's just the three of us and our guests. I think that'd be very cool. At least one show.
What's up next week, Miles? Tell us about our show next week and who is our guest, and if Mike can close out the show. This is great.
Our show next week is going to be Crystal Two Bowls, who I will be calling soon and talking with again. So it's the day before Thanksgiving. You could call it Thanksgiving if you want, but we're giving thanks for taking. We give thanks for taking away a country, taking away a big piece of land, Turtle Island. And so we're going to talk with Crystal Two Bowls, who is the co-founder of the Land Back campaign, which Veterans for Peace is supporting. You can go to our page, to veteransforpeace.org, and learn more about the Land Back campaign and follow the Land Back campaign and support it. And yeah, I'm really excited for that show, and I'm excited for this show. So I love y'all, and it's great every week. We're gonna let Mike take it out this week.
You closed it. You did it. You said everything we need to say. I look forward to next week. The military that people think is so great is the same one that created one of the largest genocides in the history of humankind on Native Americans. It's the same one and the same genocide. It's the same tradition that started, hundreds of years ago.
The women and the men in the military, we love you, we respect you, we honor you. We want you to reach out to the GI Rights Hotline. And you're the reason that we're doing this show. Families, the reason that you enlisted most likely is the reason that we're honestly doing this show. This is the best service that I've ever done. So,
all right, we'll take it out. See you next week.
All right. Peace and love, y'all. See y'all next week.